Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Leadership Speak series of L Forum. Today, I have the privilege and honor of welcoming Mr. Chris Shaffer, who is the head of the claims division at George Hills. And I have known Chris from his past life at York, and we worked together, had some wonderful times together. And Chris and I have embarked on many interesting projects while he was at York. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you, Ringo, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. And I think it's best that you give us a little bit of a background about your journey so far as a leader, and your because you bring in a very unique flavor in terms of the experience and the kind of industries you worked in. So I'd love to hear your background for the people watching the show.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. So my leadership journey began early on in my career as I was actually an IT worker, and as I was working my way through college, I found myself in positions of leadership in IT scenarios for interstate banking and financial services, largely overseeing programming projects and networking projects. And I will tell you the there was not a lot of leadership training that was provided by the organizations that I worked with. Their thought was that excellent technicians could rise to the level of being I guess marginally okay leaders. almost a very real manifestation of the Peter principle, where we're simply going to promote people to their greatest level of ultimately their incompetence.
I'm gonna stop there.
Yes, and actually, it served me quite well in terms of employment, and also gaining some experience and some insights. The juxtaposition in my own life was that I was working in a technical world, but my education was in liberal arts, and my avocation was actually in performing arts. And so
Wow, that's a perfect mixture.
So I was kind of an odd duck to begin with. And so when I was put in positions where I was actually given meaningful mentorship by people that saw something in me that I probably didn't see intrinsically in myself, in terms of helping me grow into being a leader, and saw that there was some obviously something in me that I inherently probably wanted that. I really responded to it very well, and that ended up actually happening when I was working in an IT role for a third-party claims administrator, and I was taught some things that I don't know. It wasn't really formal; it was really informal. But I was really taught that some of the fundamental principles that leaders have to have is they have to be unselfish and really sort of humble in their approach towards leadership. And in that way, it can actually help you as an individual insofar as your growth professionally, and it can lend to your success. And I took a leap of faith, and I stepped out and actually learned these principles and utilize them with the teams that I was leading at that time. And lo and behold, these principles ended up working out well for me. And it wasn't until I really started working with York that I realized that, these principles and concepts I was working with had more formal names to them. And there was, and I started learning about, really formal servant type leadership and entrepreneurial leadership and things along those lines, and putting more formalized names to them, where before I was just like trying, okay, we're all going to get together and we're going to, get from point A to point B, and, moving from more tactical work to more strategic work, and also moving away from line level management into leading leaders. And so that was a big transition for me as an individual, and also insofar as leadership skills that I was trying to develop. It's kind of come full circle as well too, as I'm now at where I am, coming from a large, working ultimately for a large organization like York, which had actually toward the time, my end of the time there, we actually started working internationally, into moving back to a small regional organization where I have a very hands-on contact with virtually everybody within the organization. At the same time, I was asked to take a leadership role in my faith community as well, and so I oversee a congregation of
Wow.
some 300 households.
Wow. Interesting. Okay.
The title is, I'm actually a bishop in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and so I've been serving that capacity now for about 3 years, and I've been serving in a leadership position with the church since 2012. And those lessons that I learned in business have helped me insofar as the leadership that I've leadership roles and responsibilities that I've taken on with our church, and also vice versa as well too. I think that there are, the lines between them become very blurred, and your roles become a little bit more squishy. It's I think it's served me well, and I hope it served more importantly, I hope it served the organizations that I serve and the people that I've come in contact with well.
Now very interesting, Chris. That how you've been able to marry the learnings from something which is very, you know, personal and using it on corporate concepts. That is something we should have probably a separate conversation on.
Probably.
That's very intriguing, and I've made a note of that. So if you were to look at yourself and say, "Hey, what did I learn? How were the what was the metamorphosis from the young IT worker to the leader that you are today? What learnings did you carry, and what are your, let's say, principles of leadership today?"
Principles of leadership today, I really focus on a number of things. One, I want to empower people, and that empowerment comes in many different ways. I think that leading people is more than just a straight line of authority. It really comes through influence, and to be able to lead by that influence, you need to engage people and have relationships. And when you have those relationships, you learn what drives individuals. And I think one of the things that leaders have a responsibility to do in terms of empowering their people is, one, giving them the resources that they need to do what they want to, and what the organization wants them to accomplish. Two, we need to yoke ourselves together to look at what the barriers are, if there are barriers, insofar as maintaining those goals or objectives. And three, availability and connectivity. I think leaders need to be available and connected. It's not so much that you are, if I were to take a military term, you're not so much a non-commissioned officer where you're there in the trench with your workers necessarily, but there needs to be a level of empathy and connectivity to where you can have a valid conversation, and valid not in your eyes, valid in their eyes, right? A valid conversation with them, and have them be able to receive some type of benefit from that, whether it be motivation, whether it be something more in the lines of that's more tactile, right, in terms of resources, or in terms of time, or in terms of a direction. But you need to be able to have you need to be relevant in their eyes. And that's some of that work that I think that leaders, that successful leaders do, and I'm still trying to be a successful leader, is maintaining that relevance and maintaining that connectivity, so you can have that relevance with those that you work with. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, and that's immensely helpful. I mean, there's really nice, points you bring out, that staying connected and being available as a leader is immensely important, because times are changing, and where uh, things move so fast, and a piece of news which probably happens somewhere half a planet away comes to you in nanoseconds, versus earlier that information would take months to get to you not too long back, right?
And,
So,
it's ubiquitous now too, right? It's
yeah,
that speed, but it's also the availability. It's
yeah,
not just coming to me; it's coming to everybody, including those that are on the teams that I lead and those that I serve. So it's
exactly.
like, so so that requirement for that relevance, it's amped up a little bit because of that speed, because of
Exactly.
the
So
ubiquitous
because
nature
you
of
would
those
you
things that
would
are happening.
cease to have the influence if you don't have the information, and so
Yes.
and you are really seen as someone who, at least someone who's able to process that information better and come up with better decisions or judgments based on the information that's shared with you. So absolutely. So my next question to you, Chris, is what are your thoughts on entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial leadership? Have you seen that manifest in the world that you live in? And what are your thoughts and what do you think constitutes entrepreneurial leadership?
It's a really good question, Ringo, and I think that there's challenges to that too. I think that the some of the classic definitions that we walk out of maybe our econ class or our Western education regarding entrepreneurship has we see icons of entrepreneurs in our culture, and we're like, oh well, this person does that, so I need to be independent and innovative and maybe even brash or somewhat outspoken, to be entrepreneurial. Maybe I need to be, incredibly wealthy or invent a better light bulb or a better mousetrap or an electric car or a brand new operating system or something along those lines. I think it's something that's that spirit though, is really about creativity and responsiveness, and again pulling that into and making it applicable to um, the goals and objectives of your organization, or maybe even being able to be responsive to this outside stimulus that we've been talking about. Just taking it back to your last comment, Ringo, about things that can happen on, half a planet away. We can become responsive to that, and it opens up new opportunities for us, either in terms of a new objective, something that we hadn't thought of before, or maybe a new way to fulfill or to meet a current objective that we already have. Entrepreneurial leaders, again, I think this is where a lot of the humility comes in there, because I think that there is a tendency, and I've faulted I've looked at my own self, and found fault with something that I would almost consider, maybe an intellectual elitism, where I know that I'm right, and I know that I have this very strict, rigid framework in which I'm working within, and I'm going to be, very hard pressed to move out of it. And that type of I don't know if you would call it elitism or rigidness or rigidity or what have you. I think that it stunts that entrepreneurial spirit and that ability to be more agile, to be more nimble, and to be more responsive to that stimulus, those occurrences, those things that are happening in the world that are unavoidably and absolutely impacting all of us. And I think it's been within business. I mean, I look at it also with with the work that I do with my vocation inside the church as well too. I look at it as with my relationships with my family and my children. I think it's that type of, you can call it entrepreneurialism, you can apply it to business, but I think that there's applicability in probably every aspect of our life if we're really going to be honest with each other.
Awesome. And in your realm and the world that you live in, it's high risk and you're dealing with risk all the time. How entrepreneurial can you get, Chris, in the worlds that you live in?
Risk management is always something that you have to look at, and I think that's a fair statement to make. And so I think that there are points where you exercise judgment and prudence in caution and care. I don't think that entrepreneurialism and carelessness go hand in hand. They really don't. It's not a matter of gambling on a high reward, high risk sort of basis. But I think it's more of the ability to synthesize um, information and look for applicability in places where that risk is managed to a tolerable level. Let's face it, everything that we do in this world is faced with a certain amount of risk. I mean, every time we go in an airplane, we're basically defying gravity. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's not without its risks. And many of the things that we do, just in our everyday lives, have these incredible risk statistics when you look at them. Um, but we often push that back in our mind, right? Because we are focused on going from point A to point B and doing these various things. So I think to the certain extent that you mentioned that, Ringo, I think that you can't, and it's probably not prudent to discount the risks that are out there. But I think that it's also important that you weigh them and you judge them based upon what you know, and new information that you have.
Interesting. So, Chris, in your journey uh, as a leader, what challenges have you faced? I mean, I'm sure you faced numerous of different kinds and hues. But if you were to say these are the oft repeated challenges that I've had to surmount on a regular basis, and this is something that is core to the world that I live in, what are the challenges you have faced?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of them that are out there. I think that that adversity comes to us in many different ways, and it's at a high level. Um, I try to look at things in ways that I categorize them as so far as the things that I do that impede my own, things that I have direct control over, right? I can be my own worst enemy, right? Sometimes my own adversity is just a product of choices that I've made or biases that I have, or things that I may or may not lack that I have definitely have control over within my own life. And if I need to be really objective with myself, I would try to look at those things. I think that there are obstacles that are put in our place by others that have the same sorts of challenges that I have, but we're working together, right? So I'm working with others' biases, right, with their experiences and with their um, directions that might be counterintuitive to the vision that I have, counterintuitive to the division that the group I'm working with may have, or they may just have an entirely different agenda altogether. And then I think that there is a smaller group of things that we have that are just somewhat difficult to diversify out of. There are certain situations and circumstances within a business organization where you are responding to situations that are unanticipated, out of your control, and cannot really be diversified out of in any way, shape, or form. And so you're kind of just to use an athletic metaphor, you're really lowering your shoulder and taking that one head on. I think those tend to be in the minority, though, if I'm really being honest. I think that if we look at them at these circumstances and these challenges that come our way, it's a lot about our approach. The pandemic was a great example of that as well too. I mean, the entire world had to deal with the outcome of the pandemic, and it was something that was evolving every day, something new, and created a great amount of division amongst all sorts of different populations. And I think that it created an incredible challenge for leaders. It created a challenge for me, most definitely within the business leadership roles that I played, and also within my religious community, and to a lesser extent even within my family, about decisions that we were going to make and things that we had planned on doing, and the direction of our own goals. So like I said, there are some things there that can definitely impact, limit your opportunities and your performance. And I think as leaders, it's incumbent upon us to try to control the things that we can control, right? To engage with the individuals that may be impacting us and bringing challenges towards us. And then for that small group of things that may be relatively large in scope, like the pandemic, to be open-minded and to face them as fearlessly, but also as objectively as we possibly can.
Great. Yeah, I think very well said. And yeah, um, moments like the pandemic does completely bring the new normal, right? So, and everything
It's being
changes.
constantly redefined for us. Even as we speak, it's probably different than it was an hour ago.
Yeah. So Chris, you know, what would your suggestion or advice be to managers, aspiring entrepreneurs? What would you say they should keep in their back pockets as they pursue their journeys in their careers?
I'll share some pieces of good advice that I've been given by friends and by leaders. Um, One of the first ones that I got as a young supervisor, and something that I've always remembered, is be on the lookout for your replacement immediately. Encourage them, train them, find them, and mentor them. It's not a threat to you. It's your key to new horizons and to new opportunities. Two, I would say, keep an open mind, be humble, and be curious. Ask a lot of questions. We're not pertinent 4-year-olds, and we're not asking why all the time, right? But it's good for us to ask questions. And I look for curious people when I'm looking at people to employ. When I'm looking at people to lead teams, I want curious people. I want them to ask questions. I think that it's fantastic. And when I get a question that I don't have the answer to, it's even better, right?
Oh,
Because
yes,
it's
absolutely.
it's like, okay, now this is challenging me to go out and dig deeper, right? And so I think that's really good. And if there's anything that I could say to anybody, it's eschew that nature that we have to not be wrong. It's okay to be wrong, to admit and to learn from being wrong, and because that opens the door to progress, I think, on any number of levels you might talk about.
No, I think that speaks about your own approach to leadership. That you are a student. You are a student for life, and you want to learn. And the smart leaders do that. They know that they always don't have the best answers in the room. The best answers is in the room somewhere. You got to find it, basically.
Yeah.
So I think that's very smart of you, and I think I am a big fan of that approach. That I'd like people to ask questions and also come up with any suggestions, because you don't know where the good idea is going to come from. So yes, I think great, Chris. I'm sure our audience is going to enjoy this conversation. Thank you so much for your time, and wish you all success in all your future endeavors. And I'm sure you and I are going to have separate conversations on a number of other topics. I'm looking forward to that. And thank you again, and all the very best.
Absolutely, Ringo. Thank you, and thanks to everyone that listened. Thanks.